Before we go to public comment, I am going to move item 20 up to right behind item 17. Is there anybody here from the public who wishes to address the committee?
Greetings. My name is Pete Bennett. I'm using these 3 minutes to share some of the pieces of the story that I've been through. I am actually going to take much of this and rebroadcast it into videos on YouTube. I hope that you start responding to some of the events that I've gone through. Mr. Taylor, I knew Sergeant Lunger. Sad. Mr. Butts, I spoke in front of Mr. Bell. I don't recognize any other cities at the moment, but I have police reports, accidents, hit and runs, beatings, assaults in almost every city in this county. My family was murdered 2 years ago after I spoke in front of the Board of Supervisors. I spoke on September 23rd, 2014 at the 9:30 a.m. or the 9 a.m. meeting. I spoke about domestic terrorism and pipelines blowing up and how my role in PG&E became the impetus that got Michael Peavy indicted. Trust me, it's true. CPUC president, which much of this board interacts with the CPUC at various intersections, you communicate with the CPUC. 4 days later, my nephews, the Stracks, were killed in Salt Lake City. A month before that, I went to the coroner's inquest with my roommate that was beat to death in the jail. But they said it was a bologna sandwich. The deputy, when I was in jail, when they tried to kill me, is the same deputy that drowned in Lake Tahoe. I'm here to wake you up. I'm here to get you on your toes. I've had my attorneys beaten up, one of them right down the street. I lost a half $250,000 case against the town of Danville in Bennett versus Collins. When Gary Collins was linked to the police scandal involving CNET, within 5 weeks, he was dead at the bottom of an elevator shaft in Palo Alto. Really true. That's one of my witnesses that were murdered. My family in Salt Lake City is connected to a stolen trust document. That's 5 more. The girl killed in Sonoma County is Amber Alert AB 535 by Bill Quirk. That's my friend that didn't show up for the date. You run and you issue billions, millions to billions. I've been reading all your documents. I've gone through what's called an interlocutory directorate looking above you, and I look at the unions. There are things that I figured out by just piecing it together that should have been pieced together years ago. All right? And I'm here using my precious 3 minutes because my attorney, brother-in-law, was murdered on Orinda when he went over the rail at Capino Pablo. Unacceptable. My attorney's son was a soldier. He's the other suicide victim in the county jail. And I knew Robert Smith that was hit by a Clayton police car. And Gary Bell died of spinal meningitis, and I already know that. And Councilman Szymanski died of it. And Tax Collector Polachek, who I work for, I know 3 of them. And I have other cases around the country. Wake up. I hope that all of you, one last thing, I hope every one of you go to Deputy Foley's memorial and start talking to the officers. The reason there's 2,000 to 3,000 people out there is they know what I know.
Okay, thank you. Would you fill out a speaker card and give us
I have. I'm going to keep
Okay.
on speaking because I can address every one of your items today with something on it.
All right, thanks very much. Next item is approval of minutes. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion from Pierce, second from Taylor. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Abstain.
And 1 abstention from Trotter. Okay, the next item is election of an AP chair and vice chair. We can either do this in one motion or we can do it in 2 separate motions. Julie?
Good morning. Yes, I would be honored to nominate Bob Taylor as the next chair and Dave Trotter as our vice chair.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion from Pierce, second from Trotter. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, it's unanimous. Congratulations, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
to consent calendar.
Point of order.
Have a first.
Point of order. I'd like to remove item 8.0 for a brief statement of discussion.
Would you repeat that to me again?
Item 8.
Full 8.
Full 8.
Why don't we just discuss that
We'll
first?
discuss that right now then.
All right, thank you. I do want this to be approved on consent, but I just want to state for the record that it is the will of the Moraga Town Council that this occur. I will not be voting for this item. I'm going to vote no on 8 because I was in the minority on this. I did not think it was an appropriate use of Measure J funds, particularly with respect to the proposed design of a roundabout at the intersection of St. Mary's and Bollinger Canyon Road. So I'll vote no, but I do expect that the rest of you will vote to uphold the consent calendar, and I will vote yes on the remainder of the items.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's say I have a first, and who was the second?
Let's simplify this. I will move approval of all items on the consent calendar with the exception of item 8 at this point.
Second.
We'll take a separate vote for
First.
that.
Second. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we go to 8.
I will move approval of item 8 on the consent calendar.
Second.
I have a first and a second. You okay, Christina? Got it? Okay. We'll call. Good idea. We'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right. That was the end of consent calendar. Now we move on to regular agenda items, legislative update.
Good morning,
17-0.
Commissioners. Our staff just recently got back from a trip to Washington, D.C., where they had a marathon round of meetings. And Randy, I'm not sure if you want to give a quick update on that right now, or if you want to give a quick update.
Sure. Thank you, Lindsay. So we stormed the Hill, in essence. We met with USDOT. We met with a number of appropriations committee, both on the Senate side as well as the House side. And what we were kind of trying to gear up for was we're trying to get an allocation through the appropriations committee for the 10 test beds in the United States to provide some federal funding for oversight, improvements, modernization of the existing infrastructure. And it was well received by not only our delegation, and sometimes it's difficult to read the members when they sit there in front of you, but it looked like everybody was very enthusiastic about supporting some type of an allocation for future revenue to help support the infrastructure improvements that are needed out there at Gomentum Station and others. But also they were impressed with our innovation program. So it was good to get out and basically talk about the progress that we've made out at our test bed, show pictures, talk about our partnerships with various partners, and I think it was very well received. Jason Ty and his team did a great job setting up we got in the right places, although we had to split up several times because we didn't have enough time to brief one committee and then get to the next one, so we split up, and I think it was well worth it. We'll see when the appropriation bill is final and see if we were heard. So, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
It's okay.
And we also have Mark Watts here, our legislative advocate from Sacramento, to give us an update on what's happening there.
Good morning. Cover 4 items for you quickly. First, just a brief update, because I'm sure you're keeping up with this, but the transportation funding package has an April 6th timeline that the governor set to get something done. The key bill that's moving right now is SB1, and it was supposed to be heard in Senate Environmental Quality this week and was put over till next week. There were a dearth of members because of other conflicts, so it just was put over for a week. AB1, Mr. Frazier's bill, has not been set for hearing, but we're not concerned about that. He's very actively engaged with his leader and the governor and the Senate leader and Chair Bell in discussions that we have no idea what is being spoken about. The goal of those discussions, and I've had 2 meetings with the governor's staff at their request this week, is to forge a final single unified bill, but nobody explains whether that means just taking what's out there in SB1 and AB1, which we were very familiar with, or do something closer to the governor's or something in between. But the goal is to have a unified bill to present to both houses, and they're working very diligently on that. So in the meantime, as I indicated, Senate Bill 1 continues to march through the process. After the hearing next week in environmental quality, it would be going to appropriations. So it's on a timeline to be one of the vehicles, and I assume Assemblymember Frazier's measure will figure into this. So that's where we are at this point in time. I thought I'd mention a bill that you took support on, AB 28 NEPA delegation, which is Mr. Frazier's standalone bill. Is moving readily. It's passed out of the Assembly. It's in and did pass out of the Senate Transportation Committee earlier this week. Was amended to put a 3-year sunset into it, and it's now heading to Senate Appropriations, where we expect it to materialize next week. It wasn't in today's file, but I expect to see it on Monday's file for next week. We'll see, and that'll be will be a very happy occasion to put that behind us, because if it gets done within the next couple of weeks, it'll meet the amended agreement between the federal government and Caltrans that allows the pilot program the current pilot program to continue, generally speaking, outside the law. So this will bring it back into the law. Finally, a quick update: autonomous vehicles. You are a leader in the state on legislation, and there are people who are emulating what you've done. AB 1444 by Assembly Member Catherine Baker has been introduced, which would replicate in a different code section, which was important to understand that. Different standalone code section to allow shared autonomous vehicle operation in a pilot program, similar to AB 1592. But in the city of Dublin, and LAVTA is behind that. And the shared autonomous vehicles, a little bit different concept than what a lot of the big firms, auto manufacturers have been focused on. I don't know if they've really paid attention to this bill or yet at this point in time. They sure took attention to Ms. Bonilla's bill last year, so we'll see how this turns out. In addition, Senator Cannella from Merced County has introduced a very similar bill that would authorize autonomous vehicles to be operated in a similar fashion as what we have planned here in Contra Costa County at a commercial center in Merced. So congratulations. You have probably the most popular structure for a bill I've seen in years to have it replicated so quickly. And last but not least, I wanted to mention probably the not surprising, but it's almost shocking, but not surprising. The cap and trade auction, the most recent one, came through, and the revenues were only $8 million for the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, much less than the $200 to $250 million that had been the regular auction revenue take over the last 2 years. This is the second time we've seen a significant drop-off, and I'm worried now that since the governor's package, as well as both SB1 and AB1, rely on some cap-and-trade increases for transit, and the pressure to put transit into the transportation package is so large that the anemic showing in the auction may be a stick in the wheel for getting a transportation package done. So that's my update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I just wanted to, can you, on AB 28, can you talk about Assemblymember Wiener, I think it was Assemblymember Wiener's comment about time frame? Because this we went through on a pilot basis, right? And then it was for a couple years. Now, again, they want to do the same thing, right?
Yes. What I found out behind the scenes is that the Senate leadership is not comfortable with the program on an ongoing basis, and as it had been already amended once to have a 5-year sunset, they thought the best thing to ask for it now at this point in time, not to ruin any projects that are in process if this is reauthorized, but to put a cap on it and force us to come back later, they asked Mr. Weiner to, Senator Weiner to intervene and ask for that amendment. So it's just a comfort level on a successful program. Yes. We've had it for more than a decade. It's been operating very well. So, and I'm not aware of any local agencies that would have complained to the pro tem, and I'm confident that it was simply just a comfort level issue, and 3 years extension would be all they could go for at this point in time. So, well, I would point out, however, both SB1 and AB1 have the full indefinite extension in those bills, so there's still hope for something more than a 3-year extension.
No.
Mark, thanks for being here. Always good to hear from you. On the cap and trade auction, is there any thought that because of the sort of Washington, D.C.'s idea is to step back all of the EPA and that, is that people are going to, they're sort of gambling, saying, I don't need these credits because we think they're going to go away or not be needed?
The analysis on this auction hasn't really begun in earnest. There had been a similar one with similar results this summer, and at that point there was they could understand that a lot of speculators had just dumped their credits into the marketplace and brought the price down out of uncertainty of whether cap and trade would be extended or not. And so the speculators decided to get out last summer. And then we had a bit of a recovery in the late winter auction. I forget the number now, but it was close back to the normal expected level range. This one, I think, caught folks by surprise, but I think the analysis might be a bit of that by the corporations that are subject to the credits, as well as a concern whether the legislature and the governor will extend the program at all. The governor has made extension of cap and trade as it stands now a high priority, and as I understand it, that along with housing issues would be next addressed after the transportation program is addressed by April, we're hoping. So I'm just, in my mind, I think it's a combination of wondering what the federal government actions are going to do combined with the uncertainty about whether the extension will actually materialize.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark.
Dave, you had your light on?
I did, but Newell anticipated my question and asked it for me.
I wanted to ask Randy a question, or Lindsay, or whoever went to Washington. So was there any discussion there about punishing sanctuary cities with transportation funding and that sort of thing? Did you guys get into that at all? You know, my city's in-your-face sanctuary city, and I just wonder if that came up at all. Or did you talk to any Republicans there?
We talked to both sides, actually, on the Ropes Committee, both sides. I call it the THUD. I don't know what THUD stands for, THUD. Both majority and minority side. Nobody brought up sanctuary cities or sanctioning any of the cities for anything that they're doing. But once again, we didn't ask that specific question.
Yeah.
If we go again, we can, but be careful what you ask, because you might get the wrong answer. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wondered.
Questions? Okay.
Yeah, I didn't quite get which number you were on. I couldn't.
17.
And that my pages are not in order because it's large print. Is that all the way towards the back here? Oh, yeah. I did want to speak on this. All right. Yeah, but my friend printed it out in large print, so mine's 13. That's why I can't get the same synchronization. So my name's Pete Bennett again, and unknown to you, when my family was killed, I got on the phone and I started calling Washington, D.C. Unknown to you, when I lived in Danville, my F-250 exploded on 680 northbound. Took me 10 years and the arrest of the Danville police officers to identify who rigged my truck to explode. My neighbor was Mike Severaw, killed on Stone Valley Road, burned alive. That's not the only one near me that's been burned alive. You go to my hashtag, for those of you, I can't tell everybody's names here, you go to hashtag PGE Witness. That's pound PGE Witness, and you'll see the explosion that killed the 8 people in San Bruno. And I was forced into a project with PG&E. I wrote software for them, but it wasn't real. And you're going to Washington, D.C. and asking for money. I urge you all to look up Congressman Cummings, what happened to his aide, Mary Malone, who was burned alive in her house with her children. Or, excuse me, her children were burned alive. And look at Ashley Turton, who her husband worked for President Obama. And over in El Cerrito, we've got attorney James Gillian. Now, I knew that name. And last time I spoke about that, he was gunned down in El Cerrito. Well, that's connected to a $1 billion case that I was involved with 12 years ago. My software career puts me in a lot of weird places. Defense team for PeopleSoft. My documents were stolen. PeopleSoft won. Larry Ellison won. I've been on TV with Larry Ellison. I was supposed to testify in Congress about the H-1B visa. I got attacked, beaten up. No, 2 weeks after, the next day after I saw you on July 4th, 2011, I was arrested the next day. And 2 weeks later, they totaled my car. I haven't seen my son since that day. They were kidnapped, but nobody seems to want to believe that. That leads to attorney Dick Grossman, Danville, Doyle, Danville, and Grossman. He died of cancer. Why am I sharing all this with you? I've been on the phone to the Transportation Committee, and I've been on the phone to Mark DeSonia for 15 years. I am going to call him up about the sanctuary city. I already have. And I'm going to basically penalize you because I have all your departments, all your agencies, and the union people have been beating me up and arresting me, and they've been running me off the road, and I'm pretty sure they killed my family. And that is something that's very important to me, which is going to become your problem because I don't believe you in D.C.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
You got it.
Moving on to item 20.
I think, Mark, did you want to say one more thing on?
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I neglected, when we were talking about autonomous vehicles, to suggest or recommend that on the Baker Bill, AB 1444, that you consider taking a support position to support local transportation interests in the county.
Okay, well, let me address through letter.
Yeah, we can do that if we take a position. But let me clarify the reason why they're doing that is they're actually a partner of ours on extending our Bishop Ranch pilot with. So when we signed an agreement with Easy Mile, we got the first 4 shuttles. 2 were going to be deployed out at Bishop Ranch. There was 2 others. And Supervisor Haggerty met with us and expressed interest in extending that. And if you think about our 684, it's part and parcel to our congestion relief program. You have Dublin BART station to the south, Walnut Creek BART station to the north. So the idea is to provide feeder systems into those BART stations to get a few of the people off of Interstate 680 during peak hour. So it makes a lot of sense. So that's kind of the background for them, because they don't have any other shuttle. They won't be able to access any other shuttles. So they're going to be a partner with ours on our 4th shuttle program. So it makes sense to support that bill.
So I guess, Lindsay, what I'm going to ask, are we going to put that in letter form or whatever?
Yes, so the staff recommendation at this point would be, staff recommends that you approve a support position for AB 1444, and we will update the staff report for the board.
So we need to take a vote on this?
Yes.
So moved.
Have a first?
Second.
A second. Any more discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Now we move into item 20, correct?
Yes, thank you for taking this item out of order to accommodate my schedule. So item 20, what you have before you is an RFP for Strategic Communications and Marketing Services. Barbary Coast Consulting has provided these services to our agency for about the last 4 years, and their contract is coming to a close. So we would like to put out an RFP to get some competitive bids and see what else is new. Our agency has gone through a lot of evolution in the last 4 years. Our capital program is winding down. We're focusing a lot more on programs. We've become much more active in terms of incorporating transportation technology into all aspects of our system. And so part of this RFP is to kind of build upon the work that we've done to try to educate the public about what we're doing and look a little bit to the future and see how we can begin to better represent ourselves and the work that we do to the public. One of the biggest items and the biggest portion of this RFP is a redesign of the website. Right when I started here nearly 4 years ago now, we had just launched the new website. It was the first time it had been redesigned in many, many, many years, and it was a little bit of a painful process to get used to something new. And now that we have lived with the current site for a while, and staff has had a chance to get used to it, there are some limitations to it in terms of how things get formatted, how we display items, incorporating video, making documents available, and especially, around our meetings and agendas, we'd like to try to make them a little more visible on the site. So a big portion of this RFP is redesigning the website to make it function a little better for the public, to maybe add some multilingual capabilities, to add some accessibility items there that the first iteration did not include, and also to make it a little more useful for staff as well. So in addition to that, there are quite a few other things included in here, and I apologize that you didn't have enough time potentially to really read through this. So creative development is a big part of this, expanding our photo and video library and kind of refreshing some of our materials. The world is going mobile. You probably read most of your stuff on your phone, and not all of our stuff is formatted quite correctly for that, and a lot of people are more interested in watching a video about a project than reading a long narrative about it. So this would be trying to make ourselves a little more modern and really serve up information in a capacity that people want to consume it in. We also have an item in here for communications support. As you've heard Randy say many times, we're a small staff. There's 20 of us, and we rely heavily on consultants to help us deliver our work. That is very true in the marketing communications area as well. So this is to help make sure that we can continue to produce the amount of materials that we produce, and that we also have a person who's essentially dedicated to our team from the agency side, so they have a chance to interact with our staff, get to know us, learn a little more about our projects, because when you have a point person, they're generally able to navigate the waters a little quickly and be able to produce more informed content. So I know there's quite a bit of material in here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the scope of work.
Questions of staff? Yes, ma'am.
I will just say thank you, thank you, thank you. The last redo of the website certainly needed improvement. I remember the first month or so we were all searching just to find our own packets. So having those kinds of things a little more readily available will be wonderful. I love your creativity, what you've done already, and getting fresh eyes on it to add to what we've already done, I think is a great idea. So I want to see what other ideas are out there, and thank you for proposing the RFP. So with that, I would move approval.
Second.
I have a first.
Second with Newell.
First, and I have a second. But before I proceed, is there anyone from the public wishing to be specific on this item? Item 20.
Seeing none, go.
So this one's about marketing, right? That's marketing. It's a marketing company, strategic marketing and communications. I urge this body, the selected body or appointed, whatever the combination is, that I'm going to send you facts. I'm going to go to the TIMS database, which is where I discovered that two of my homeless friends that I was trying to keep alive, that were the ones that froze to death, their accidents weren't in the TIMS database. You won't find my accident in Lafayette where my car was totaled in 2011. 2 weeks after I spoke to Mr. Arnrich. Mr. Arnrich, I'm going to hold you accountable. Because down in Danville, they stole my Krugerrand collections when they arrested me. And that's all about the CNET guys, which you don't know that whole story. But I know those guys very, very well. Norman Welsh's father rented a cabinet shop next to me. I know those guys. They've harassed me for 40 years. All right? And I discovered things about development, constructions, unions, and I kept looking, and I kept digging. And this body here, when you go to Washington, D.C., you're going to encounter people that I've already called. And you're going to encounter the things that I know about on the other side of the country. And you're going to encounter some parts of my story about Jonestown, which I didn't expect to find until my nephews were killed. And that's the difficult part about what this county is about. You cannot interrupt me. Actually, you can't. The law states that I can speak for my 3 minutes.
I didn't say that. I said I'm going to interrupt you for a second. I didn't say you couldn't speak. But could you be specific on what you're...
Well, I'm making an argument. I'm making an argument what you need to do in your communications.
Okay.
I'd like to see something about what I found out about the Officer Youngstrom, who I knew, killed on your freeway, and my accident in Lafayette because you're getting federal funds that I can't get a police report for it. No, it doesn't exist. And when my truck blew up on the freeway, there's no police report. So when you go up to talk to the Senate Committee on Public Safety, who I talk to extensively, and when you go to Congress and you go to the state, you ask them to build a law that can get me my police reports going back 25, 30 years. Because I've been driven out of business by gunpoint multiple times. Multiple. And I'm talking about not a few $100,000. I had one business today that would have 150 to 200 million in revenue. I'd be a millionaire. Instead, I end up with a broken hand and in the hospital arrested. And that's Officer Bergen in Pittsburgh. And that story followed me to Danville when my customer, Dr. Fang, who's in my litigation, that was murdered. And that's the circle that goes on and on and on. My story is unbelievable. And it's dragged on for so long. I'm going to keep talking.
Thank you, sir. All right, moving into item 18.
Was there a final action? I know there was a first.
Good morning, APC Chair Taylor. My name is Randy Carlton. I'm the CFO for the authority. This resolution is an item we're seeking your recommendation for approval to the board. It's a resolution format that may look familiar to you from your home agencies. Public agencies, whenever we choose to spend cash on hand and to repay ourselves from bond proceeds in the future, the IRS requires that we establish that intent, and that's the purpose of this resolution. We will be back in April for the official authorization of the bond transaction. A little background, especially for new Commissioner Trotter. The authority here has a bond program where we leverage our future sales tax. We issue bonds, in the earlier years of our measure, so that we can put that money into brick and mortar projects for the authority and bring them on board sooner than later. And we repay those bonds with the principal and interest on those bonds from our sales tax proceeds. This resolution is really just a precaution in the event that we spend money from our cash on hand, that we could repay ourselves when we do close the bond deal in May. Staff recommendation is that you approve the resolution.
Questions, staff? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. I have a first, and I have a second. Before I call for the vote, is there anyone wishing to be specific and speak on this issue? Seeing none, call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. 19.
Good morning, Chair Taylor and Commissioners. I'm here to speak about, thank you. I'm here to speak about the proposed mid-year budget. This is an annual thing that we do every year. We do this in the month of March, as the bulk of our projects are always mostly related, the dollar value is related to the capital projects, and the timing on receiving the invoices is typically 30 days after the end of the month, and it gives us a better idea in January when we start this process to kind of see where we are with the projects and collect some additional invoices, and then move forward at setting the budget for the remaining part of the fiscal year. This table is just a snapshot of all of the different revenues and expenditures that we have for the authority. We have our main source, which is the Measure J funds, which is the sales tax revenues. We have the federal, state, and local revenues, which are the grants that we receive for our capital projects and programs and studies that we do through the CMA, the projects team, and the programs area. The investment and other income is related to the investments of the cash on hand and the bond proceeds projected for the year. The bond proceeds is an example of Randy was speaking about the using of the capital projects being built first. We go out and we issue the bonds, and as these expenditures occur, we get reimbursed for that. So our budget is about $45.5 million. And then the other sources, this is earmarked funds through the collection of sales tax revenue in previous fiscal years that's allocated per the expenditure plan. The timing of some of the municipalities and the different things that happen, sometimes they don't happen in the year that we collect the money, so the revenue builds up in the individual funds, and when the project comes to fruition, we use those funds. The project section is the capital projects, and you can see that there's a decrease of about $23 million. A lot of that is due to the timing of the projects. It's not that any projects are being canceled. Basically, sometimes we will go through the prior fiscal year. Some projects move faster. In the case of one of the examples here is the BART extension. That was done a lot quicker in last year. Some of the funds were expended in the prior fiscal year, so that's part of the reduction. Part of the reduction in here as well, as we get further into this presentation, the I-680 project. We had a timing delay on that. That's about a little over $6 million. That's a decrease there, so that'll make up some of the difference as we go through there. The program section, that's an allocation of the revenue that we receive and the allocations we give to the different districts and programs that happen. We made a small adjustment in there related to the current expenditures and the contracts that we have in this fiscal year to reduce it to $1.1 million. The planning section, we had a couple of the contracts come to conclusion. We have a PDA grant that we work with a number of cities. Some of that work was constructed last year. Some of the projections for this year were decreased as well. We look at the administrative section. We have an increase of about $1.3 million. In there, the increase is not solely, but the majority, the $1,241,000 is related to the Measure X ballot measure. We owe that money to the county for putting it on the measure, so that's where that portion goes. The debt service, you can see there's an increase in there, about $1.5 million. Should we issue bonds in May, it's projected that for the debt service for the May or June could typically be about $1.5 million. So that's just a placeholder there for when this comes to fruition. Sales tax revenues, which is all Measure J. You can see that since the decline in 2008 and 9, we've seen some really good increases of 8.8% in 2013 and 5.5% last year. Currently this year, the totals that I have from the State Board of Equalization shows us at about 1.1% over where we were last year for the first 3 months. In the next week, I will get the next point of sales transactions from the State Board of Equalization, and I'll have 6 months of data, and I'll know the total of 9 months of revenue for the authority. So as I present this to the authority, I should have updated tables to give us a better idea where we are. But we've left our budget to stay at 84.87%. A lot of the projects and programs allocate funds based on revenue we receive. A lot of the cities receive Measure J funds for local street maintenance. And if we were to increase it, there would be a projection in there to some of the cities to go out and issue contracts. And if we fall below, it could cause a little bit of an issue. So that's where we are. This table here is the sales tax revenue for the first 3 months, the point of sales transactions. You can see that gas continues to be one of the ones that is always continuing to go down year over year, quarter over quarter. But the strong ones are the retail, new auto, and restaurant. The economy seems to be strong in those areas. The retail stores continue to increase, new auto sales as well, restaurants in there as well. When we get the next set of data, we should have through the Christmas holiday season, and we'll be able to kind of see where we are year to date. This table here is just a snapshot overview of the sales tax revenue, and then a huge component of the authority is getting other resources. It's not just Measure J funds that funds all of these projects throughout the county. We get a lot of grants and other revenues to help build all these projects now. So you can see in there we had a high of almost $80 million in 2014, and that is directly related. A large component of that is to the Caldecott Tunnel, and you can see now in 2017 some of the large money in there is for the I-680 carpool lane and the I-80 San Pablo Dam. A large portion of that is RM2 funds. This here is a snapshot of all of the capital projects. You can see that revenues have increased $7.4 million. Again, all of our reimbursements that we receive is directly related to the timing of the expenditures. So in prior years, you may have seen declines that is directly tied to the timing of the projects. We don't lose any funding. It's all related directly to when we get out and get the things invoiced and when we receive the money. So the RM2 funds have increased $1.6 million. There's a component in there for the completion of phases for SR4 East widening and the Caldecott Tunnel. Another large component or increase of $2.1 million is the ECRFA funds, which is related to the Balfour project and utility money we're getting reimbursed for on that. The other funding is $12.5 million, and in there we received about $3.4 million for the sale of a parcel that was part of the construction of Highway 4. And in that $12.5 million, which is other, we did receive $5.9 million of Tri-Valley, Tri-Delta funding. Thank you, Hisham. So that completes that project. In here is a summary of the bond proceeds and how we use the bond proceeds. So in the expenditure plan, we have 9 categories for our capital projects, and they're listed through Caldecott Tunnel all the way down the Richmond Parkway. So I'll take the first one. Caldecott Tunnel, we had a proposed budget we have remaining expenditures in there of $5.3 million, and we're projected to receive about $2.7 million of RM2 funding. So that leaves a balance of $2.6 million. That's going to be used from the bond proceeds that we have collected and that we have bonded for that are in-house. And once the expenditures happen, we do some requisitions to bring the money in-house. You can see in there the SR4 East widening. It has a projected expenditure of $4.8 million, and then we also have fundings from RM2. We also have the sale of the parcel in there. That's part of the 3.9. So that shows a negative number. So that is related to the timing of when we received the money for the sale of the property, and also sometimes in prior fiscal years we get some expenditures in August, and we don't get those billed right away, so the money isn't collected for 30 or 60 days. So the timing of the revenue is fluid on these CIP projects from the start to the end, which could take several years. So you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, it looks that we would end up using about $41.2 million of bond proceeds. And at the beginning of the fiscal year, we had in our bank account there $45.5 million. So there's projected to be a little bit of bond proceeds for next year. But if these projects move faster than anticipated and we have the budget capacity in there, we'll end up using them all and using some Measure J funds that would be reimbursed through the resolution that Randy had talked about prior. Here is a snapshot of the sales tax revenue. We were expecting to get about $85.5 million. And on the left-hand side, we break down all of the project and program areas in the expenditure plan and the allocations of the percentage of the money that we receive. You can see in the capital project side, we have about 42.5% of the sales tax revenue. That equals about $36 million. We also have some external sources of funding in there of about $78 million, which is made up of bond proceeds as well as some grants as well. That was about $36 million as well. And then our total expenditures for all of the capital projects is $123 million. Here is the change for the Measure J projects as we were talking about the expenditure categories and the timing. The second one down is the BART East Contra Costa Rail extension. You can see that we have a decrease of about $6 million. That is due to expenditures that happened in the prior fiscal year that we paid, so there wasn't a need to carry the budget in this fiscal year. The SR4 bypass elements, CIP 5, the larger project in there is the Balfour project. The timing of the construction of that project didn't happen in this fiscal year. It's going to continue to happen this spring and summer. But due to the utility relocation, some of the costs are being pushed to the next fiscal year. As we look at the proposed expenditures for administration, programs, and planning, administration shows an increase of about $1.35 million. I had mentioned the $1.25 million for the election costs related to the Measure X. That would be the increase. Another component we always like to highlight in here is the salaries and benefits for the 1% allocation. We're going to use about $700,000, and of the 1% of the sales tax, that's only going to be 0.8% of the 1%. So we're falling below, and we'll continue to grow the reserves in that particular fund category. Programs is going to decrease $1.1 million. We worked with a number of the different agencies that receive some of the program funds. We were able to take a look at what current contracts we have between now and June 30th, and we were able to reduce some of our prior projections. Planning, $4.4 million. That's a decrease of $600,000. We had the expenditures decrease due to the completion of the public outreach on the tax expenditure plan and timing of the countywide transportation plan. Expenditures related to the priority development areas decreased $340,000. Also, several contracts and studies are partially funded by grant funds in here, which is important to know that there's many different programs that they have and that they're working on, and the timing on those are always pretty fluid. Debt service, as we discussed earlier, is going to increase $1.5 million related to the potential new bond issuance. The principal amount due is $15.3 million, and the interest amount due would be $20.7 million. With that, that concludes my presentation on the budget for the mid-year. Year over year, our projects continue to change. I'd like to say again, there's never a loss of any capital grant funding. If there was, we would make sure we brought that to your attention separately and as soon as possible. I'm open for questions.
Questions, staff? Comments?
It's a good report. Thank you. I appreciate the explanation when somebody from the outside looks in and sees revenues going up and down in a project. But because we're in the business of building things, that's why it is, and also because the time lag in billing and reimbursement. Compared to what most of us do, we each of us as individual cities might have a little experience in that, but we don't do all projects. So I think this is great. I think we've evolved to a really good spot in how we explain this and appreciate the detail. And I think it's really well done. So I'd move the item.
Second.
Have a first.
Quick question.
Okay.
What's the continuing expenditure on the Caldecott Tunnel? Is that reimbursements or something, or?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. There is still ongoing landscaping maintenance going on for the next 3+ years. And there are also some ancillary projects in Oakland and Berkeley that we're funding through a fund exchange with the Alameda CTC. So these are going to go on until probably 2020.
Okay.
I would ask is, when does this go up before the full board?
Later this month. This month.
This is just mid-year.
So this is just mid-year. I got it. All right.
We'll be into the real one in a couple months.
That's, it never ends. Okay. So you're working on, there we go. You have a first
And a second.
and a second. All right. Before we call for the vote, is there anyone from the public wishing to talk on item 19 on the specifics of this?
The very specific part, number one, the retail and the restaurants. You derive tax revenue from the restaurants, correct? General sales tax. Right across the street, $30 million a year annual business, wiped out, Piedmont Lumber. I built a lot of the restaurants in the Bay Area, many. I've had about 10 of my projects burned down. I don't know what ended up in there, but you lost some of your sales tax revenue in some respects. What do you think the adjustment is over there on the tax rolls? It's a lot. So, I know a lot about this stuff because I got 40 years of it. And a lot of my friends know my story, and I'm going to bring up something because this was a perfect timing. Caldecott Tunnel. You don't know this, but everybody said Janice Ferris, the one that crashed the bus and flipped the tanker truck in 1982. One of my friends who knows my story very well, he ponied up a piece of information. He said she wasn't drunk. I'm going to ask that case be reopened. I'm going to peel the onion back. Because on every intersection in this county and every BART station, there's a guy from a bull killed on the train tracks. I already shared this with Washington, D.C. They already know some of this. I sent many letters to Senator Sessions, thank God. And things have changed for me. So you've got over right here at this station, a guy from Somalia jumped in front of a train. A guy from Kabul. A guy almost burned alive in front of the Concord BART station. That's your utilities. That's your source of revenue. When I went to Congressman DeSaulniers' ACA meeting, which is important because he's on your transportation committee, the union guys, the police officers showed up to escort me away from the building so I couldn't talk to the head of the school district who knows Senator Jedley's son, who I know too. Or knew, excuse me. All right? So you guys may be a little stunned with some of my conversations. But Senator Jedley had a great effect on this county. And the Caldecott Tunnel, when I walked out of the building, and this is the union argument at DVC last week, I think it was, I got outside, and all of a sudden, the guy with a Teamster jacket was right there in front of me asking me questions. Big jacket. What are you doing? Who are you? I know I've been beaten up by union people. I know my car was set on fire by somebody rigged to explode, and a union police officer shows up and said it wasn't a fire. And the unionized Lafayette police force connected to the Danville police force. They can't seem to find the car accident. Somebody tried to kill me. How would you like to lose 40 grand worth of cars? Or have somebody break into your house when you're in jail and steal $50,000 coin collection? That's what goes on. We're going to have a conversation leading to D.C.
I thank you, sir, for your comments. We'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Moving to item 21.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. This will be a very brief presentation this morning. Staff is seeking approval of the proposed revisions of Chapter 1 of our Authorities Administrative Code, Article 4, Section 104.6C, which discusses the powers and duties of the ex officio representatives. The proposed revision today will allow an ex officio representative to also serve as a commissioner board alternate. The reason for this proposed revision is to allow our ex officio representatives to also be a board member and represent the authority on other outside related transportation boards. In this capacity, the ex officio would either serve as the alternate or the ex officio at any given meeting and not in both positions. So if they were to serve as an alternate, they would have their alternate ex officio serve at that board meeting. So that is pretty much the gist of the presentation. We do have an ordinance that's been drafted and is in legal review, which will be brought to the Authority Board on the 15th for approval. That's the end of my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Would it be fair to characterize this as the Don Tatson rule?
Yes, it would allow him to serve on the San Joaquin JPA.
If I'm not around?
Yes.
If I'm not present, he can take
it would allow, it would allow him
for the
to
next year.
To be your alternate, yes.
Thank you. I just think we should put it out there. It's a nice piece of staff work by our good friend Don. Thank you.
So, I just, we have an odd way of the way things show up on our agenda. It's supposed to be based on consensus. But this is the second time I've seen something that came from an individual. That's a little uncomforting. I don't remember this coming in any committees or anywhere. It just shows up. That's kind of not how government works. Otherwise, we'll be here forever. And while this might have some merit to it, it concerns me that we take this approach because it means every single one of us can start putting things on the agenda because it serves our purpose, whether it's altruistic or not. Government is supposed to be based on consensus. The way things are put on the agenda are not done based on individuals because, first of all, we're using staff resources, we're using the resources of the public, and we're using resources of this as a body. So it concerns me. So in principle, I don't think this is a good idea for two reasons. One, because of that. Secondly, on the merits, we shouldn't be fine-tuning things to serve a specific purpose. If it serves the greater good, and that it has, and Don Tatson is a very good friend who I honorably respect in every way. This just feels like it's accommodating a specific need in person, and I'm not sure that that's why we set up these kinds of checks and balances. So our ex officios, while they might serve in this case in a dual capacity, the ex officio spot is to advise, not participate in making real decisions, but to help advise, equally access to questions, answers, but not to vote because they are on that ex officio role. They are not representing the taxpayers relative to this cause. And because that person has a dual purpose, I'm not sure that that's, unless I hear another argument, and I'm open to that, I don't see the reason that we should be doing this. We haven't had a cause or a problem in the past,
Well, I guess I would point out, and I respect your opinion, but I would point out that we have a couple of other, or at least one other, ex officio position that is filled by a sitting council member who is part of a region that might be named as an alternate. The representative from MTC is a council member and cannot be an alternate from her regional transportation planning committee because she's the ex officio member. So that shortens up the number of people who are eligible to rotate or even serve in the capacity of that region. if a couple people are called out of town, if in this instance Mr. Trotter is unable to attend a meeting, he needs to have an alternate who can attend. And the way that region is set up, there are only 2 other cities that could be an alternate to him. And both of them right now happen to be sitting in ex officio seats, which means there could be no alternate for him, which I think complicates the issue. And I think as far as how this got on the agenda, we ran into this at the board meeting last month, where there was a need for an alternate for the SWAT representative. We fortunately had a quorum, but if we had been close on a quorum, we would have needed that alternate as a voting member to make that quorum. So I think this is a good solution. I think it's not just one case that is going to be served by this, but I think it has potential to serve in other cases and make sure that we have the ability to keep our city representatives, our regional representatives at the table. And if that means that somebody else has to fill in the ex officio capacity at that point, then that's what has to happen.
And I just wanted to kind of tag team off of what Commissioner Pierce was saying. SWAT in particular, and they're not the only one that only has 6 members. Of their 6 members, 2 of them are ex officios, 2 are commissioners, and 2 are alternates. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for them to appoint other alternates. They only have the 6 people, and they all serve a capacity on this board. One's an alternate for Glover, as a Board of Supervisor alternate, and one is an alternate for Hudson. So that doesn't leave a lot of ability to appoint other alternates for Trotter. And that's just, one in particular. TransPAC also has 6 members, and 5 of them serve as a commissioner and alternate on the board. So the only other option is to have the same alternate serve for the same person, but they can never fill in for both in any given meeting. So that is another reason. And then, as Commissioner Pierce also stated, at a recent meeting, and due to the weather that we've been having, we barely had a quorum. I think we had 6 members of the 11 present. So we did run into multiple issues at once that brought this forward, not specifically just related around Tatson, but just the issue of looking at the structure of the regional transportation planning committees and seeing that they don't really have a capacity, because SWAT contacted me and, they were saying, well, how are we going to appoint an alternate? Everybody on this board already fills a capacity. So it would mean, appointing Anderson to serve for 2 different people or Stepper to serve for 2 different people. And that's difficult considering that Anderson is also a Board of Supervisor alternate as well. And she is the first alternate for Glover. So that is the other reason as well to bring this forward, besides just doing it for Tatson. It was just looking at the structure of some of the regional transportation planning committees and our issue with the recent quorum lately that also brought this forward.
With that, I would move approval.
I'd support it if we call it the Trotter rule.
So I'm gonna second that motion, and I do have something I want to say. People I think here know I have a pretty good sense of humor, and I think this is actually quite funny. I stand corrected. It's not the Don Tatson rule, except that it actually is, because there's another example that Julie was so tactfully describing without actually naming any names. And I have a couple observations. One is, Don, I'm going to try to make every single meeting and make this a moot point, so you can continue to carry on in your ex officio capacity. But I do understand that because I was able to attend that meeting from my hospital bed, we had a quorum. And so I was happy to do that. I hope not to be in a hospital bed in the near future either. So let me just say, Julie, you were very tactful in not actually identifying the nature of the problem we were facing with the La Marinda alternate to this authority. But the staff report at the SWAT meeting suggested that it be the representative from Danville, be the La Marinda backup alternative member on SWAT. And you can understand why that might have raised some concerns from La Marinda. And I understand that that's why, this was placed on our agenda. And I want to compliment the staff, and to the extent that this actually is the Don Tatson rule, Don Tatson for taking care of this so admirably. And I'll support the item. Thank you.
I have a first and a second. I guess the question I'd ask, I don't want to call it the Don Tatson rule. I think we need to call it something else, an administrative rule or something. But,
Change to the
that-
administrative
but-
code, that's all.
That's what it is.
right, but I just want to make sure, and this is kind of, will clear legal in the sense of we're making sure that we're covering the regions?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's a question. All right, I do have a first and a second. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this from the public and be specific on this?
I'll keep it very narrow, but I'll explain to you. What I do like about the commission, how it's set up, which has turned into my advantage after 15 years, is that it's from this city, this other location, and that salad bowl of different commissioners from different cities breaks down one of the components of the problem that I've dealt with, which is not getting what I need from the people that should be giving it to me. And I spent a lot of time in the hospital over this. And this is probably not the right place to do it. But there's a thing called victims' compensation. And I ended up owing the hospital $300,000. My friend was knifed and conquered, another $500,000. I was beat up in Danville, Mr. Armridge, by your building inspector, Gary Collins. I should have been arrested and thrown in jail for felony attempted murder. I have to go spend another $100,000 of the county's money on my shoulder. That's why I'm mad at you, Mr. Armridge, because you boxed me in. And the opportunity of slicing up the ex officios and the alternates allows me to address multiple cities. And by the way, there's been enough people in this county harmed that did not get their victims' compensation that you probably could get $100 to $200 million from the Victims' Compensation Fund, which is a giant bucket of money if you look at it. And they keep us from getting it. They just drag it out so you never get reimbursed. And then the hospitals in the county eat all the costs. So the ex officios and the alternates, they become a viable person for me to spread the word across all the counties. And part of this story, by the way, leads into the Municipal Pooling Authority. Because I filed a claim with Walnut Creek, and within a week, police officers in Walnut Creek that will be arrested tried to run me down. Because my claim was hyper-focused. And that's all documented. You're going to get emails from me once I get all your emails. I'm going to be one step ahead of you with Congress. And I'm sorry, but Congressman DeSantis is a failure in my eyes. Because my family got murdered, and I was calling him up. My roommate got murdered. My attorney's son got murdered. My attorney's brother-in-law got murdered. My neighbor in Danville found dead on Mount Diablo. Another one found dead on Mount Diablo. My son's playmate, Ryan Fuchs. I know Peter Rancis, his son was killed. I know the Pack family. I don't believe anything anymore. I don't believe a single police report that's come out of this county for 40 years. And that's why the alternates and the ex officios and all those people, because they become part of the living, breathing record of what I'm talking about.
Thank you, sir. We'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Correspondence and news clippings. I have no comments or reports. Anyone else, commissioners? Executive? All right. We're going to adjourn to our next meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Same stuff.